Hi everyone! Now that you've learned some basic rules of JSX, in this lesson we are going to do a challenge to consolidate what you've learned for now. Our goal is to dynamically display this list popular JS front-end frameworks on the page. Note that it must be displayed dynamically, not hard-coded. And yes, although React is technically a UI library, I'm treating it as a framework and including it here. I've prepared a starter file for you, which already includes the 3 core libraries. You can pause the video and try coding this on your own first, then resume the video when you've finished. If you've finished, let's now work together to implement this challenge. Step 1. Prepare a container. Create a div element with an ID root. Step 2. Create the virtual DOM. First, observe the structure of the content. There should be an h1 or h2 tag for the title, and an unordered list UL with 3 li list items. Since JSX only allows one root element, the whole structure needs to be wrapped in a container or a fragment. Do you still remember fragment? We introduced in last video. If you want to avoid adding unnecessary DOM elements, you can use fragment to prevent meaningless nesting. So, for the title, I'll use an h1 tag that says JS Front-end Frameworks. Below it, we'll add a UL containing li elements for React, Angular, and Vue. Once the virtual DOM is created, we can move on to rendering it onto the root container. So step 3 is get the root container element by its ID. And step 4, render the virtual DOM into the root container. At this point, you've completed the static list display. Now, let's address the requirement to make this dynamic instead of hard-coding the data. In real-world development, this data would typically come from an API fetching it from a backend database, rather than being hard-coded in the code. For now, we'll simulate this data with a simple array. Add a comment. Simulate some data. Then, define a data array and store the 3 framework names in it. Modify the li tags. Replace React with data 0, Angular with data 1, and Vue with the data 2. Don't forget to wrap these in curly braces. Now, take it a step further. Each li element corresponds to an item in the data array, right? So we can use a loop to process this data. What looping methods are available in JavaScript? We have for loop, for each, map, filter, while, etc. Which one should we use? Let's try for loop first as an example. You'll see it throws an error. Expression expected. Why? Open the notes from the last lesson and take a look. Here in the second point, have you noticed that it says in JSX tags, JavaScript expressions must be enclosed in curly braces? Note that this is about JavaScript expressions, not JavaScript statements. Do you still remember what a JavaScript expression is? And what is the difference between an expression and a statement? Well, an expression produces a value and can be used anywhere a value is required. For example, the following are all expressions. 1. Variable a. Here, a is a variable. For example, if you previously defined const a equals 3, then a here is reading the value of this variable. What if it hasn't been defined before? Even if it hasn't been defined before, it's still an expression. It's just that it will throw an error at runtime, saying a is not defined. 2. A plus b. This is easy to understand. It performs a calculation and returns a value. Then 3. Some function call like add 1, 2. Is this an expression? Of course it is. It's a function call expression. You pass 2 arguments and the function processes them to return a value. Then some of you might ask, how do we determine if it has a value or not? It's very simple. Just assign it to a variable on the left-hand side, like const x equals. If it can be assigned a value, then it's an expression. If not, it isn't. Okay, let's continue. 4. Array map. Is this an expression? Array represents an JavaScript array. And isn't the map method and arrays specifically used to process arrays? For example, we create a temporary file, write some temporary code, let array equals 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to use the map method to double each number, multiply each number by 2. Does it return a value? Define a variable to store it. Then log it with console log. Doesn't it produce a value? Open the console. And the result is 2, 4, 6, 8. So, of course, it returns a value. So, you need to be proficient with the methods on JavaScript arrays. Alright, so this demonstrates that it's also an expression because it returns a value. Next, the 5th one, function. Is this defining a function? If you use a variable to store it, it can be stored. Try it out. In a temporary file, delete the previous code and write const demo equals function test. Let it do just one thing. Print the letter A to the console. Then look at it. If you print out demo, does it have a value? Yes, it does. It's the function itself. So this is also considered an expression. Alright, we don't need this file anymore, so delete it. The above are expressions. Next, let's talk about another concept. What is JavaScript statement? The following are all statements. First, if conditionals. Look at this. Does it qualify as an expression? Can you assign it to a variable on the left-hand side? No, right? You would never write something like const demo equals if. You would never write it this way, right? Second, for loops. Try assigning it to a variable. Can you assign it? No, it doesn't produce a value, does it? Alright, the third one is switch. Isn't this also a type of conditional? Have you noticed that these statements all control the flow of code? If and switch control when to execute and when not to. For loops control how many times to execute and when to stop based on conditions, right? So these things are all about controlling code flow and don't produce values, so they are not expressions. These are expressions because they return values. Alright, that's the explanation of expressions and statements. Now, coming back here, can you use a for loop to iterate here? No, you can't. For loop is a statement, not an expression. Then how do you write it? You need to process the data and put the returned value into the UL, right? Similarly to early, where we processed 1, 2, 3, 4 and put the values into the results. Can we write it like this? Data map processes the array, takes each item, and writes the function body. Previously, for 1, 2, 3, 4, we multiplied each by 2. Now, do we need to wrap each item with an li tag? So, write return li. Inside the li tag, there's content. What is it? It's item, right? Can I just write it like this? No. If you write it like this, the return value for all items will be an li wrapping the word item, right? So here we need to read the item variable and add curly braces. Writing it this way will read it correctly. But don't celebrate now. Actually, the console is complaining now. Each child in the list should have a unique key prop. Why is that? Didn't we previously mention that React uses a diffing algorithm behind the scenes? That diffing algorithm relies on this key. You can simply understand it as this. There are many li elements on the page, and each li is unique, right? So each needs an identifier. What should that identifier be? The key. But what value should it hold? Each key value should be unique, right? Do you remember when mapping through an array, the second parameter of the callback function is the index? For example, if there are 100 values, the index will range from 0 to 99. Each index is unique. Can't we use the index as the key value? Let's try it. Save and check. The warning disappears. However, let's make it clearer. Writing it in this way is somewhat unreasonable. Sometimes it can even cause serious problems. But we are not at that point of discussing the reasonable use of indexes yet. For now, just know that when iterating, each element in the list must have a unique key value. What that value is doesn't matter, as long as it's unique. For convenience, I'm using the index for now. That doesn't mean it will always cause problems. Later, we'll delve into when it works, when it doesn't work, and why. For now, we are dealing with static list, so we'll keep it simple. So first, distinguish between expressions and statements. Then remember that every element in the list must have a unique key. Alright, that's it for this lesson.